Om Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we were looking at chapter 8, verses 15 to 22. We were just beginning today, 22. So Brahman beyond the manifest and unmanifest world. So we find it difficult to imagine beyond our planet or even beyond our own immediate environments. So to understand something which is beyond all that we know, all that we don't know, something beyond that, it's almost inconceivable. And all of you who are on the WhatsApp can see that little image which Ashad offered us. You know, you zoom out and then you zoom back in to where you are. So the Brahman percolates everything in that sense, way beyond it. So that's what one has to get one's head around to actually start thinking about where we're at. So every individual has a set of vasanas. We can understand when we go to sleep that all our world which is manifest now is unmanifest. It sort of closes up, folds up into that seed form. And then when we awake again, we are that same individual who was there yesterday and before we went to sleep, and now is the same as we wake up. So something is manifesting again, our personalities, our world, etc. So the whole idea is to exhaust these vasanas. So we have a world which we maneuver through. And depending on how we go through this world, we will either accumulate more vasanas or reduce our vasanas. So we see what's behind the whole projection of vasanas, projection of our vasanas, that Brahman. So the whole spiritual sadhana is to get back to that original nature of the self. We also today will be starting on the topic path of return and no return. It's got a lot of poetical values in here from 23 to 28. Let's there was some question at the beginning. What's the question? I'm not sure I can answer this question. We can try.
A question to begin the class. Cosmologists calculate the age of the universe to be 13.78 billion years, while one day for Lord Brahma is calculated to be 4.32 billion years. Are scientists and Vedantic scholars using numbers in the same way?
Numbers are numbers. I don't know how they're using them. I don't have that knowledge. But if anybody has that backdrop of how they're calculating, I don't know how. I'm not a mathematician. you know, the origin. Vidya.
I think in Vedic times are slightly different to the English calendar time, so hence it may not tally to the core, because our monthly months go according to the lunar cycles of the full moon and the new moon, and then usually it's the middle of the month that a month is born in the Vedic calendar. Unlike, 1st of October being the month being born, it's usually around the 15th of October that a month is being born. So hence why there would be a slightly different thing, which is why if you look in our culture, people who are born, the time of their birth and the star in which they are born determines their birthdays, which changes every year, unlike the English birthdays, which are, fixed as the same day of birth. So in our household, we always have 2 birthdays for each of us. And sometimes, if the stars come across 2 days, then you have 3 birthdays.
Okay.
There is that small variance. But whether this and that equates in pure numbers, I wouldn't know.
So we don't know. Maybe somebody knows, but don't know here. But that's a point that it goes according to lunar calendar, and we go in the English calendar according to the sun. So you have 2 birthdays. Anybody else before we move?
Like in the Christian Bible, scholars of the Bible calculate how old the universe is, when did it begin, and they get to a number which is about 6,000 years ago.
Good.
I think the origin of the question is, are we trying to suggest something is finite, or are we trying to suggest something is outside time?
What are you suggesting is outside time?
Well,
or
the
finite?
numbers that are suggested in the Vedantic texts are trying to suggest it is timeless, are they not?
It's trying to suggest it's beyond your comprehension. So whether that's in a remit of time or beyond time, it's giving figures. So it's giving a fact that it gives figures is giving a time span, which is in a remit of something finite. But that in itself is beyond our comprehension. And what the knowledge is suggesting is it's beyond time.
So perhaps the answer to the question is scientists are trying to give a number which we can comprehend, whereas what is happening in the Gita here is trying to suggest that it's beyond our comprehension.
Perhaps, yes. I don't really know what the scientists are concluding, so I can't make that assessment. But generally, if you're going through a process of elimination or projecting something, whoever you may be, if you're using that analytical approach, you're going with all the known facts that you have, and then you're projecting something at best. On what basis, we don't know. So what we can conclude is that from whatever knowledge they have, they're projecting something to come to a conclusion. Whether that knowledge is sufficient, we don't know. Yeah. We don't know. So this is a projection. Somebody calculated whether they would be termed a scientist in this context or not. There's no Eastern or Western, there's no English or in Indian calendar or something like that. That their calendar one goes in the lunar, one goes in the sun. They may vary in that way. I do remember watching some program, but I can't pinpoint that, so it's verifying it is redundant, trying to verify it's redundant, where it seemed to, a calculation of a mathematician seemed to calculate that it was the same as this, and I remember thinking, that's what I read in the Gita. But I don't remember that, so it's hearsay as far as we're concerned.
So if on one of Vidya's 3 birthdays, we were to ask her, how old are you? She would surely respond, I am of infinite age.
No.
Incomprehensible age.
I mean, Pavanji, I'd just like to recall what Swamiji explained time. He said it's the interval between 2 experiences. So the definition of time itself is born only in the second experience. So therefore, time itself is finite because the first one is the Brahman. So it's only when you have the second experience that difference is defined as a second. And hence why the unit of measurement for time is in seconds, then minutes and hours. I think that's Swamiji has explained it so beautifully. Time is such a big concept, and he put it in such simple words. If we reflect on it, we'll actually realize that is true, because when we've done mathematical problems where we've had challenges like, the train travels from X to Y, and this is the distance and this is the speed, and calculate how fast it could do, and you apply that knowledge to this concept of time, where time is only born in the second experience, it's not there in the first experience.
So it's finite. So it's trying to get across our remit of limitation and to understand that there's a possibility of something beyond that. Let's go. 22.
Purushassa parapartha bhaktya labhyastvananyaya yasyantastani bhutani yena sarvamidam tadam.
Renu, if you could read the verse.
O Partha, that supreme being in whom all beings dwell, by whom all this is pervaded, is indeed attainable by unanswering devotion.
Swerving devotion. Thanks. So, O Partha, Partha being another name for Arjuna. And remember, the conversation is between Krishna and Arjuna. And Partha, just an affectionate name, Partha Sarthi, Arjuna's charioteer, author of this commentary. So that Brahman, whom all beings dwell, is attained by unswerving devotion. So understanding unswerving devotion, that constant thinking on a higher or universal value. There's a surrender to a universal value, unswerving devotion, consistency. So right now, it's like we see a projected world. It's like we see a snake when it's a rope. We see a pluralistic phenomena when there's a Brahman. That's the idea. The snake that we see from that rope, the world that we see from that Brahman, is nothing but pairs of opposites, goods and bads. That expression of the world. All beings dwell in that projection. So it's like a staggering concept that it's a projection of your mind. So to get back to that Brahman, that self, one needs a unswerving devotion. So as you consistently think on whatever you think on, so you become that. So if one is consistently thinking on the physical body, you're thinking, I've got to get fit, watch what I eat, you become physical in that way. You could be in a positive. It could be also in a negative, always worrying about what you should be eating, what you're not eating, what you're doing. You could be in always trying to clad yourself in X or Y or whatever. It could be excessive in the opposite direction or positive direction. But the fact that you're constantly thinking on the body, you become a physical individual. Whatever you're thinking on, in fact, if you're thinking on the mind, emotions, negative or positive, that's what you, whatever you saturate yourself with, that's what you become. You can just, if you know the technique, if there's negative emotions going on, how to switch it off and move on to the next. That's what it's trying to get us to think about. Move off those negative, pitch up on something bigger, move on to something positive. Similarly with your intellect, if you are constantly thinking, focused on the intellect, building that, you become more analytical thinking. You exercise that more. And if you're thinking on the self, you become the self. So it's not that the other three get neglected, but in actual fact, when you're thinking on something more universal, you start putting the rest in shape in relation to your world so that you can actually fulfill your vastness and desires. So you can move off the non-essentials. You streamline it. You streamline life, so you've got less to be consumed by. So that consistent, unswerving devotion is that emotion, that feeling after something higher, devotion towards something higher, love towards something on the same level or lower, that identification, devotion or love. One's at a higher level, we refer it to love at a lower level or same level, feeling of identification. So you're an attitude of surrender where you're acknowledging a splash of divinity everywhere. We can do this and help ourselves through a process of synchronization, which we talked about last week as well, I think. What is this synchronization? So, just remind yourself in anything that you pursue. When you wake up in the morning, remind yourself, I am Atma Brahman. So prayer is often a way of helping you synchronize. But, you may do that in intervals of the day or not. But that consistency of thinking, I am Atman Brahman, without making it mechanical, but just an awareness, there's a divinity underlying everything. And that constant thinking, that devotion, that emotion, you slowly become more aware, the intensity of your that Brahman. So it's a practice day in, you're punctuating your day, then you're reminding yourself a little bit more often as you get into it. You sit quietly, you can reflect on that. So the idea is, just as the dreamer becomes the waker's mind, wakes up and becomes the waker, we as individuals are trying to get out of this projection, this temporary state, to become that Brahman. So the Brahman pervades the entire waking state. The idea is, when you wake up, you see it objectively. Right now, we quite easily see our dream state objectively. It's not real. But our waking state is very real to us. So it's trying to push us to understand that all beings dwell in the Brahman. There's something beyond this waking state. This is, by that, a method you can help yourself. Let's read the verse.
The third topic, concluding here, assures that you can attain the Supreme Brahman through unswerving devotion. Devotion signifies identification. Identification means becoming one with the object or being to which you are devoted. Just focusing on your attention upon the object by constant thought of that object. The principle of attachment functions. As you think, so you become. This principle applies to all aspects of life. When your interest and attention lies on the physical body, you focus your thoughts constantly on your body. You then identify yourself with the body. You become a mere physical being. Thereafter, everything appears physical to you. You see only the material aspect of the world. You associate with sense objects only. Look at people from a physical angle. Behave physically. The emotional and intellectual aspects of life remain rather blurred to you.
So sometimes, if you're very much engrossed in that, and you ask that, if you see, you can see it outside of yourself. If you ask a person to actually try and think on something, they can't do it. Or perhaps you can't do it if you're engrossed in it, in the physical aspects. Can't sit quietly. You can't think about things, too engrossed in how it all looks physically, or how it's not possible. There's fixations there. Just move it off there. Maneuver yourself off it. Wean it off by having something bigger to focus on. Let's go to the...
Similarly, by shifting your interest and attention from the body to the emotions of your mind, you turn emotional. If you focus your attention constantly on your mind and its feelings and emotions, you identify yourself with your mind, become an emotional personality. You then look at everything from an emotional angle. So too with your intellect. When your focus shifts to thoughts and ideas of your intellect, you become an intellectual personality. Applying the principle of attachment, this verse promises the Supreme Self through single-pointed devotion to the Self. Through identification with the Self, the Supreme Being, you reach the fourth plane of consciousness. You attain self-realization, God-realization, the ultimate enlightenment. You then recognize that one Supreme Being alone pervading the pluralistic phenomena of the world. The entire world folds back to reveal the underlying reality, Atman, Brahman. The material world and its objects, the physical body and its perceptions and actions, the mind and its emotions, the intellect and its thoughts experienced in the waking state of consciousness, All of them are essentially Brahman and Brahman alone. You realize this truth upon spiritual awakening. This experience closely resembles the phenomenon of your waking from the dream. When you awake from a dream, you instantly realize that your dream world was a mere projection of your mind. Your mind pervaded every part of your dream, be it animate or inanimate. Your mind alone constituted the entire dream phenomena. Similarly, Brahman alone constitutes and pervades your entire waking world. You will realize that truth through single-pointed devotion to Brahman.
So as you refine your thoughts, you can even relatively see when you are pitched up on your emotional level, you're less concerned about the physical. It's just where you're pitching yourself. Less concerned meaning you could be less concerned, neglectful, or less concerned because you've refined your physical aspects and you're not concerned with that because you've got a different trait playing. Similarly, at the intellectual level, when you become more of a thinker, you're less concerned with getting entangled in the negative emotions. Where you lift yourself out through your thinking, maneuver yourself on. And similarly, if you attach your thinking to something universal, we don't know what the Brahman is, it's a word, but if you focus on something universal, pervasive, all the attributes of Brahman, we maneuver through that, we become a different personality as such. You're upping your sattva. You're letting your rajas drop away. And slowly, slowly, your identification becomes that of something universal till you become the Brahman. Through that devotion is putting it here. Devotion is not devoid of intellect. It could be blind in the set, blind meaning not thinking, but generally a true bhakta has this powerful, subtle intellect. There's a discrimination between worldly things and something higher, more pervasive. And they keep that exercised all the time. So, in its purest way, it's not just a flood of emotion. It's a directed emotion to something pervasive, universal, infinite. Let's go. '23.
Yatra kale tvanavritamritim chaiva yogina prayata. Sorry, Parvi, I'll start again.
Yeah.
Yatra kale tvanavritim avritim chaiva yogina prayata yanti tam kalam vakshyami paratarsava.
Babita, if you could read that verse.
Verse 23. I will tell you indeed, O Bharatashava, the time in which yogis departing never return, and also the time they do return.
So this starts the new topic from 23 to 28, the path of return and no return. So Bharatashava, bull amongst the Bharatas, another name Krishna's calling Arjuna. So remember, when we use this word Bharatashabha, we're meaning that one who is of that grand race, Bharata race, full amongst the Bharatas, the best amongst them, in the sense that they put in the maximum and expect the minimum. Well, we right now, so he's complimenting Arjuna. So the time in which the yogis return, and also the time in which they don't return, meaning in which case we were talking about the different sorts of desires which you have. If you pursue certain types of desires, you don't eliminate your vasanas. So you just are in a cycle of birth and death, constantly having to deal with your vasanas. Tim, do you have a question? Okay. So the path of return and the path of no return. So there's two goals you may, or two routes you may have. One is where it's worldly and things are temporary. And the other one's where you reach a state of no return, which is spiritual. Person on a spiritual path is endeavoring for that. So you could be, in actual fact, doing activities which are good for humanity, but it still could be desire ridden, like they're noble activities, but there's still a desire backing them, to which you get the benefits of that, the direct effect of doing good actions. You get punya, the merits of it. So it fructifies, as we were mentioning earlier, into a heavenly-like state. So you're reaping the rewards. You could be living in a palatial environment, or everything is wonderful. Actually, it's not time or place orientated, it's states of mind. It's how your state of mind is. Because just for example, you could go on a holiday with the intention it's going to be wonderful. It could actually be nightmarish and you could be waiting to get back. But we go with the anticipation that it would be wonderful. That's a place, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about a state in your mind, meritorious, unselfish desires, which you pursue, noble activities, produce meritorious effects, which you then reap. So we have different stages of these heavens, as they're called. One's Pitra Loka. We're going to explain this in the next few verses. Indra Loka. Loka means experiences. So Pitra is, they're denoting different time spans. Pitra Loka, Indra Loka, Swarga Loka. We're going to explain that in a moment. So whatever it is, these are all stages of heaven where you enjoy and then you go back to square one. So you enjoy it, you've done something good, you enjoy it, but then as soon as that's complete, you go back into wherever you were at. Desire, that's what happens when one's performing desire-ridden activities, activities backed by a desire, in the sense of there's a self-interest, or there's even a community interest or a interest, but it's a worldly interest. Then there's another grade, which is a person perhaps on a spiritual path. They may be doing things in terms of values for humanity, still noble, desire-ridden activities. So they have to actually reap the rewards of their good activities. They don't get a choice. So before they can go on to the next stage of liberation, to get to that liberation, they've got to stay put and enjoy the punya. And you might be thinking, oh, that's fine by me. I don't mind enjoying the punya. All the worldly things which are heavenly, I get and I enjoy. But it holds you up from that liberation. It's all temporary. So the one who's on, here poetically, it's mentioning the one who is on the path of return is called the path of the moon, the path of the moon. And the one who's on the path of no return, in actual fact, it's going to explain it more in the next verse, is the path of the sun. The one who performs activities with desire-ridden activities, but are noble, and they're in a spiritual path, they gain the benefits, and then they go on to the next stage, performing their activities towards the self to gain liberation. It can make it simple. We perhaps will simplify it in a moment. But if you're a Vedantin, meaning on the spiritual path, call it what you want. In this case, we're saying Vedanta. Meaning if you're looking for that liberation, you go through all of these stages with the focus on performing desireless actions. So even if you're reaping the benefits of some merits of something of the past which had desire-ridden desires backing it, at this stage, when you're on the pursuit of being a spiritual aspirant to get to the self, you bypass it. You don't indulge in those merits. You enjoy it, but you get out. Your view is just to get to the self. So through vairagya, jnanam, karmanya, bhakti, you get onto this.
Balaji, can I, this might sound very silly, but can I just clarify? When we're talking about heaven in this context here, are we talking about the heaven as in after we've passed away, or is it a metaphor to say the heaven that we can attain now within ourselves? Is it the heaven now that we can attain ourselves, the different types?
Yeah. There's heaven in the context of whenever we talk about it is a state of mind. It's an effect of your activities, your thinking, your activities now. There's no somewhere else.
No.
There's no place you're going to, as it were. It's your state of mind. You gain the merits. You gain the effects of your meritorious activities, your positive activities. And you that's heavenly. The effect is heavenly. So life may be joyous, enjoyable, easy, in the sense of everything's comfortable. You don't have to think about certain things. You just able to enjoy and get on with it. But if you get stuck with that, you go back to square one. So it's to actually warning, don't get stuck with that punya, the effects of your good deeds. Don't get stuck with it. Because if you're on a spiritual path, goods and bads are just relative. Don't get, you want to get out of the bads because they weigh you down, cause you stress. The goods may make it comfortable, but don't get stuck with that. It's temporary. So the focus is to be pitched up on something out of the opposites, something more universal, pervasive. You're after that permanence. You don't want transient heavenly states. That makes sense. So rather than have, it's often said, rather than have 300 janmas or many janmas of having heavenly states, it's better to have 3 or 4 difficult janmas where you get out and get to liberation. So it's never about, your circumstances are best set for you in any given circumstance, and you work yourself out of it. So there's no real goods or bads when you're looking at it objectively. It's just the circumstance. You work yourself through it. That's a spiritual aspirant. You look at it that way. This is the scenario now. What do we need to do to move? Objective, Sakshi.
Thank you.
Let's read.
The final topic, covering 6 verses, describes the 2 paths that mankind takes, the path of sun and the path of moon. A seeker following the path of sun reaches ultimate state of realization whence he does not return, while the seeker pursuing the path of moon enjoys the benefit of his meritorious deed in heaven and returns to the sansarika mundane life. The spiritual pursuits fall under 3 distinct categories. The first category refers to spiritual practices undertaken with desires. The desires propelling such activities are no doubt noble and unselfish. However, they bind the practitioners to the benefit accruing from those actions. Perforce, these desire-ridden actions lead them to the realm of experience to enjoy the fruits thereof. The realm known as Pitraloka, Indraloka, or Swargaloka, more commonly referred to as heaven. The beneficiary enjoys the bliss of heaven as long as the result of the meritorious deed, punya, lasts. Upon the exhaustion of punya, he returns to the world, to the cycle of his birth and deaths. The second category of spiritual seekers perform selfless service, karma, and practice meditation, dhyana, steadfastly. However, their mind to an extent indulge in the pleasure of their undertaking. The blemish of desire still lingers in them. Such seekers gain liberation through stages designated as karma mukti. Their karma and dhyana result in spiritual liberation only after they enjoy the fruit of their action. They go through the intermediary stage of celestial pleasure in Brahmaloka, and other realm of heaven, whence they reach the ultimate state of enlightenment. The third category of seekers take the most direct way to liberation called Kaivalya Mukti. They maintain their karma and dhyana meticulously free from blemish of desires and expectations. With consistent and single-pointed effort, they gain spiritual enlightenment here and now. Krishna offers to explain these paths to Arjuna. He addresses Arjuna as Bharata Sabha, means bull amongst the Bharat, the outstanding one amongst the Bharat race.
So you've got a few different ways of going about it, but as a spiritual aspirant, you will try and refine your thinking, your thoughts, your activities, so that they're directed to something, the self. They're not directed to worldly things. So you may be doing noble actions, maybe doing your karma, that it may have an effect in the world, but your thoughts are somewhere else. That's the direct way. The indirect way is when you're focused. He's mentioned here the different stages. Perhaps you read again, reflect. So we all have that choice. So it's selfish. It's offering the three types of activities: selfish, unselfish, or selfless. Selfish is not a spiritual aspirant, in fact. But an unselfish person on their path in the beginning may be focused in doing worldly activities. It's where your mind is. It's not the activity per se, but there may be some interest to get something out of it. Therefore, you have to gain the merits and go through it. If you're focused on doing activities towards the self to gain that liberation, it's a more direct path. So you just do what you want to do. You don't let things distract you. So we have to observe what we do. Sam.
Thank you. Just a quick one. I'm just trying to understand the difference between the second and third category, because it seems like both seekers will reach liberation or will gain liberation. The first one will reach liberation through stages designated as karma, krama, mukti. But the third one seems to be direct. I'm just trying to understand the difference between the two, because sometimes we do like indulge in the pleasures of the worldly things, and
it's not saying you shouldn't. It's saying where's your actually the word indulgence is what you got to be observant about. You see, if your focus is to get to the self or get to that truth, that's your, whatever you do, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy what you do, but you don't get caught by it and involved in it. You're objective to it. You understand as far as you're on your route, your focus is to the self. Whereas the one who is going in stages has got certain desires where it needs to get into that enjoyment. It needs to have that enjoyment. It pursues certain things too. So they can't keep their mind, they've not refined their mind's desires enough to keep their mind focused on the self. There's still a lot of worldly things going on. So they're going to get the good effects of that. But if they're really truly on that spiritual path, it doesn't matter. They'll go through that and they'll move on to the next stage. But here he's saying even to go through that heavenly state is a hindrance in a way. You know, you've got to be in it to understand it to some stage. But it's like once you understand, when you've had all the material things, they don't mean anything to you, but everybody else may be aspiring for them. Yeah. So you wouldn't get engaged in that when you've got something higher, because you see there's a futility of it. But if you've not had it, you've got to get into it. You feel like, I want that, I want that. Yeah. So that's at a relative level. But if you can comprehend it, you bypass it. Not interested in it.
Yeah, thank you.
So that's it. $24. Tim.
This commentary has so many different categories. I'm getting a little bit confused. Perhaps I missed it, but could you explain in the first category the difference between Pitraloka, Indraloka, and Svartaloka? Or are they all just the same?
No, there is varying degrees of I don't, it actually is in one of the Upanishads, and actually it will explain a little bit later, but there are varying degrees of effects of your desire and activity. So various intensities of punya, of your enjoyment or not. So I think Pitraloka is the shorter one, Indraloka is a bit longer, and Swargaloka is a bit longer, and Brahmaloka is the best of the heavens, as it were. But I have to check that.
Okay, these are explained somewhere else. That's all
Yeah.
I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Loka just meaning experience. Let's go. So just before we go, any benefit is still an aspect of your ego. You know, even if it's a benevolent ego. So what really matters in life, these are all got these fancy names here: path of sun, moon, light, fire is coming next. You know, but what it's trying to get you to understand is to get on to training your mind, your thoughts to act in a more than unselfish way, but a selfless way. So focusing on getting to that truth rather than even the relative values of worldly things, where it's noble and positive, but actually raising your own awareness, your consciousness. So something more universal rather than worldly. But you've got to start from where you're at. So you may have selfish interests. You've got to start step by step, growing out of that selfish interest to doing activities which are unselfish. You'll reap the rewards of that. If you're a spiritual aspirant, you'll move on from there. You won't get stuck there because you understand that's not it. So you may be, it's just giving you an understanding of stages of unselfish to selfless. So selfless is when you do the activity, there's no prefix, no suffix. You just do it because it ought to be done for, and you relate it to the higher, that's it. Unselfish is where there's a desire backing it, nevertheless, maybe benevolent desire to do good, but there is a desire backing it. So you've got to reap the benefits, whether you like it or not. So it's cautioning you. And selfish is you're always agitated, stressed out. It's not really spiritual. Let's go. Maybe we start on the next verse next week. Carry on.